All right, we're talking about the Georgia Bulldogs here on the Our Lads Football Network, the Our Lads Football YouTube channel. And whenever we talk about the Georgia Bulldogs, we bring in this gentleman here, Jed May, UGAsports.com. How's it going, Jed?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. So, but this has been a crazy year for the Bulldogs, haven't it?
Yeah,
Hasn't it?
yeah. That's one word. It's one word to
Yeah.
use.
I mean, if this was the any other year except this year, it'd be all over.
Yeah,
This
you're right.
SEC championship game would mean nothing, and except an SEC championship. But I guess Georgia fans don't really care about that anymore. They care about winning national championships, right?
Yeah, it's so funny because I was talking about this with some guys the other day. Like, if this was like you said, if this was last year, all the three lost SEC teams are done, and like this week, you can make an argument, I guess, like if Georgia wins, that maybe they should get in, and if Texas wins, they're for sure out, and like what would Ohio State? Ohio State's probably out, and it's amazing that this first year that we go to 12 is just such a ridiculous year with two lost teams and three lost teams and upsets, and then the one team that's undefeated is the team that it feels like nobody's talking about in
Yeah,
Oregon. So it's
that's
a weird
right.
year, man. It's a weird year out here, but all the best college football years are weird, so it's all right.
And this is just the beginning. So as long as this transfer portal deal stays, which is gonna, I think this is the new norm. I think it's great because I don't think I don't really think. I mean, look, the NFL, you could lose 5 or 6 games and be the best team in the NFL. So why can't you lose 3 and be the best college football team? So I think that's where we're headed. I've got a whole bunch of things to go over. I do want to ask you because yesterday was just a tremendously busy day for you and all around college football because of recruiting day. So how was recruiting day for the Bulldogs?
It was good. They held on to all but one of their commits. They lost a 4-star running back, Usmani Chroma, to Florida State, which isn't ideal. But I think with the talent you've got in that room, if you get Trevor Etienne to come back, like you're fine. You still signed one running back in Bo Walker, and then you get a couple 5-stars up front, which is really shocking, I'm sure, to everyone to see Georgia get some 5-stars on the defensive side of the ball. You landed a really, really, really talented receiver class, which I think if you look at Georgia this year, that's been one of the main critiques is maybe not having the elite receivers that other programs have got. So you landed a great receiver class. So yeah, it's you fought off Florida, tried to flip one of their quarterback commits, Ryan Montgomery, at the end of the process. They fought that off. So overall, it was good. It wasn't as good as it could have been. They had some flip targets out there, and all of whom went elsewhere. So there was some meat left on the bone, maybe, but overall, yeah, very, very good day. No one's going to feel sorry for Georgia that you didn't add another top 150
No,
defensive lineman for sure.
not at all. Do we know who the incumbent is at quarterback when Beck leaves? Is that a guaranteed spot left over for someone?
I don't think so. And I think that's the funny thing, because when Stetson Bennett left, it was like, well, we have a competition, but like this is Carson Beck's race unless he just absolutely falls apart. And I don't think that's true now. I think Gunnar Stockton, I think Ryan Puglisi, I think Jaden Rashada are all going to have an equal chance at it this spring. And I think another interesting thing is in the past, Georgia just houses everybody and you get game reps for your backup quarterbacks, and you haven't really gotten the chance to do that this year because most of these games have been so tight. So,
Yep.
Gunnar Stockton's been here the longest, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything. So it's going to be interesting. I think it's going to be wide open, and I think it is a true. We're going to give all three of these guys a shot and see what they can do.
Do you look at because people talk about Beck and they look at the numbers and the immediate criticism or the immediate observation is, well, he doesn't have McConkey and he doesn't have Bowers. My retort to that is, well, you see, this is what happens to really good college quarterbacks when they go to the NFL. They don't have their star players, and that's why they don't get off to usually a good start. So I guess this is a good opportunity for Beck to learn on the job early. But still, I'm sure that's not all it. What do you think is going on with Beck this year compared to last year? And let's take personnel out of the picture.
Yeah, I think there have been times this year where he's forced some throws. I think you think back to that Florida game. Um, there was, I think, the first two were just, one was he's rolling to his left and floats one to the sideline and it gets picked. The next one, he tries to squeeze one into a really, I don't even want to call it a window because the thing wasn't open. So, yeah, I don't know if that's pressing. I don't know what that is. Now, I will say over the past month or so since the Ole Miss game, and really even in the Ole Miss game, he has done a better job of taking care of the ball. I don't think he's thrown a pick since the desperation drive at the end of the Ole Miss game. So that's a plus. He has made some big time throws. Like you see it, it's in there. The same
Yeah.
arm talent and all that's in there. I know we're not talking about personnel, but drops haven't helped.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
so yeah, I don't know. I think there, not to absolve him of all the blame, because again, there's been accuracy issues at points. There's the interceptions, which I think a lot of them have been decision making as much as anything. But over the past month, and it kind of gets overlooked because George, people say, "Oh, you took Tech to 8 overtimes. Why did you have to go to 8 overtimes to beat Georgia Tech?" But the last 3 quarters of the Tennessee game, starting at the end of the first quarter, he has played much better, and they're going to need him to play better. They need to beat Texas, and they need to. If you're going to win 3 or 4 games in the playoff, you need prime Carson Beck, and I think he's showing some signs of getting back to what he looked like last year.
Who do you think stands the best chance if there's one particular player to help him the most? Or do you think, nope, this is just going to be the way it is? There really isn't that one standout guy.
I think you look at two on offense. I think you look at Arian Smith and Dom Lovett, and I think those are guys who have both had drop issues. I want to say maybe they both have 5 or 6, and Smith has had ones down the field. Lovett has had a couple on quick screens, and I think there's plays this year that I don't think are going to be counted as drops, right? But I also think there are plays that very easily could be caught, if that makes sense. And if you make half of those plays, even, or a third of those plays, how different does this offense look? So, Smith is your speed downfield threat, and he's having a good year statistically, but it could be even that much better. So you get him being more consistent catching the ball, you get Lovett open more consistent. I think that's huge. And then the tight ends too. I think the tight ends have been more involved over the past few weeks, which has helped the offense kind of open up a little bit too.
Yeah, actually, that tight end room, especially those top two, Urasek and Delp. I think there's a lot of talent there. Are you surprised that it hasn't shown more on the field?
Yeah, that's the funny thing. Through the first 7-8 games, we're all like, where are these tight ends at? And then the Tennessee game, they go for I think 10 catches and 130 yards, and Oscar Delp has a couple touchdowns, and you're like, well, this is great, but where was this against Alabama and Ole Miss? So I am a little surprised. Lawson Lucky has had a solid year.
Yeah.
I think Delp is the one that people look at and be like, where has he been for most of the year? Ben Urasek from Stanford took a while to get acclimated. He had some rough run blocking performances, especially earlier in the year, but he's come on a little bit. So I think by this point in the year, that room has improved a lot, I'd say, and they've earned more of a role in the offense. And that's, those are the rooms like teams can create mismatches with those guys. And I think Georgia's going to need to do that against some of the defenses they're going to see coming up.
What year is Arian in?
Oh God, he's like in his 17th year.
Okay.
Like he's one of these guys between COVID and I'm pretty sure this is year 5 because I know he was there in 2020 because he caught a touchdown that year in a blowout against South Carolina. So,
okay.
But he's been hurt and he's been just it's been an interesting career for him. And it's funny that as maligned as he is between the drops and the injuries, he's leading it. He's having one of the better receiving yard seasons that Georgia's going to have. Just it's interesting, man. It's an interesting career arc for Arian Smith for sure.
The backfield, the numbers are down. There isn't a star year for many of these guys. Seems like there's been a really committee deal the last few years. Do they have somebody? I mean, is Frazier someone that in a couple of years, will he be like considered a really top guy? Or what's the deal with their backfield right now? And is there anybody that could actually, really help them out big time down the stretch?
Yeah, I mean, I think that room's just been killed by injuries all year. I mean,
Okay.
Roger Robinson went down with turf toe in camp, and you hear that, and you're like, oh, okay, well, turf toe, he'll be out for a little bit. He's been out the entire year until the Georgia Tech game. Those were the first carries in the Georgia Tech game. Branson Robinson was coming back from a torn patella tendon in fall camp, and then he goes down at some point with a sprained MCL. He's been out for a while, working his way back. Etienne's had a rib injury since the Florida game or maybe the Texas game. So it's really been banged up. Frazier's the only guy that really hasn't been injured a whole lot. And he's shown some great things as a freshman. Cash Jones has done some good things catching the ball out of the backfield. So, yeah, it's just been a room that's been really, really, really banged up. And that's where I think winning against Texas would be so huge to give that room in particular, 3 weeks off?
Sure.
Before your next game. So then get Etienne rested up from that rib injury, get Roderick Robinson back going a little more, get Branson Robinson healthier. And then that room could look a lot different by the time the playoff comes around, especially if they end up beating Texas and get that first round bye.
Is there any scenario that you've heard of that if Georgia were to lose the game, that would put them in jeopardy of making the playoffs?
I don't think so. I think the general consensus seems to be that Georgia's not going to get punished for playing an extra game. Now, I think SMU might need to be worried about being punished if they come down to being, 11-2 or 11-2 SMU versus 9-3 Alabama, which that sucks to say, but that's just kind of how it is. But no, I think the general consensus is even if they lose, especially with what's happened around them, they'll fall somewhere in probably that 7, 8, 9 range, probably 7 or 8 and host a home playoff game. I think the projection had them at 7 hosting Indiana in the first round. So I don't think so. I'm sure there will be arguments. Well, Georgia's got 3 losses and, why shouldn't SMU be in? Why shouldn't, Washington State, whoever, I don't know, BYU be in? But, I don't think so. But, it's again, the difference between playing on December 20th versus New Year's Day with this team, how banged up they are, would be very, very, very big, I think.
Yeah, we'll definitely keep that in mind then. What about, we were just talking about recruiting. So one of the things that I think, and we just mentioned the transfer era we're in, and a lot of that has to do with, why be a second string or a third string on Georgia when you could be making money starting somewhere else? I know it's only been a year, but have you noticed that yourself? I don't know if there's any specific players. You don't need to throw any particular names in there, but have you noticed that yourself with the depth of this team, that if that were the case, if there were no transfer portal, craziness going on, that Georgia would definitely be more deep and maybe even be able to withstand some injuries more?
Yeah, I mean, Kirby Smart's mentioned it. He's like, our depth isn't what it's been. And I think that affects how they practice, how much they roll guys in and out. If you don't have the guys to rotate in and out, you can't do that as much. So now, has it affected this team specifically as far as on the field goes? I don't think so. I think, if it was going to affect them somewhere, it would be in the defensive backfield, but they've been pretty healthy there all season. So, linebacker, they've been fine. D-line, I think, was one area that maybe they've been banged up a little bit early in the year, especially. And they might have suffered a little bit. But no, I don't think it's affected this team specifically. Okay. But if Kirby Smart is saying that in a press conference setting, is something that is really bothering him and something that is that he's not thrilled about. I mean, we've seen it already. Georgia, you beat Georgia Tech, and then the day after or 2 days after, Julian Humphrey announces he's going to the transfer portal. That's a guy who's played a lot all year, and he gets, passed up by Daniel Harris. He gets passed up by Daniel Harris, and boom, he's gone. So you're one injury away at corner to either Dalen Everett or Daniel Harris from probably throwing in a true freshman in Ellis Robinson. Now, he's a 5-star elite guy. He's played a little bit, but I mean, do you want to be relying on a true freshman in the playoff? Like, probably not, but that's kind of where they're at.
That's where everybody's at. Yes, absolutely. All right, so let's get into this game now. I believe Texas is still the slight favorite, and I always think that if I'm a Georgia fan or somebody that likes Georgia, I think that kind of works in Georgia's favor. So that a little bit, not to the extent, because remember last year, Washington had defeated Oregon, and then the championship game, Oregon was a 10-point favorite, even though Washington had beaten Oregon, and then Washington clobbered Oregon. Again, not the same, but look, Texas did not win on their home floor, on their home field, and yet they're the favorite on a neutral field situation. What do you think about that? Just knowing the Georgia Bulldogs and knowing the game, of course, that you saw earlier this year between these two teams.
Well, we mentioned in the locker room, I feel pretty confident in saying that. That first game, like thinking about it, Beck threw 3 interceptions. Texas turned the ball over.
Crazy.
It was, and thinking, and you had the bottle throwing thing, and it's really, it feels like it happened forever ago, but it's really weird to think back on all the stuff that happened. So, I think it's going to come down to which team takes care of the ball. Georgia was moving the ball on offense early, and they turned the ball over. One interception was inside the 10, I think. So, it's whichever team takes care of the ball. And I think I go back to what I said about Carson Beck earlier, where he's done a lot better job recently of taking care of the ball. I will be curious, one, how does Quinn Ewers play? Because Quinn Ewers didn't have a great game. Georgia bullied Texas's offensive line in terms of the pass rush. And do we see more of the Arch Manning running package? Because Georgia struggled with running quarterbacks, and we knew that back in the Texas game. But to see Texas break out that Arch Manning specialized package against A&M, I wonder if we see that a little bit more. Just, Arch has got an extra, 2 months in the offense, more stuff put in for him. So I'm curious to see if Sarkisian breaks out that wrinkle in a game like this. But, these are two really good teams, and, they both deserve to be in the playoff. They both, will probably be favored in their first round playoff games and will be favored to make deep runs. Just can be, you can't turn the ball over. If one of these teams turns the ball over 3 times again, they're probably going to lose. I think that's, it's amazing that Georgia was, turned the ball over 3 times in game 1 and won the turnover.
Yeah.
So I don't think they will be that lucky, and I don't think Texas would be as lucky to, have it a close game if they turn the ball over 4 times again.
Who would be considered? I mean, is Jelon Walker considered the top player on the team? I know they've got talent still all over. I mean, Michael Williams and Malachi Starks are 2 of them. Who do you think is the top defender? And I'm not talking about NFL prospect. Just who's their best defender?
Yeah, I think Walker's in that conversation. Just because he's such a. Personally, I think they should just turn him loose and turn him into a full-time pass rusher, just because he's so good there, and your inside linebacker room is so deep as it is that you can afford to move a guy to a full-time pass rushing role. I think Dan Jackson is a guy who hasn't been talked about a lot, and he's been phenomenal all year. Former walk-on. He has the fumble, forces the fumble at the end of the Tech game to set Georgia up to tie it. He's had a couple interceptions, I think. So he's been great all year at safety. And that's a guy, again, he's not going to get drafted real high. Michael Williams is going to be a first-round pick. Walker will probably be a first or second-round pick. Starks will be a first-round pick. Dan Jackson, you could argue, is the maybe most valuable player on that defense, just from holding things together in the back end, what he does defending the run, he's gotten so much better on the back end. I remember that 21 SEC championship against Alabama, where I remember seeing a play where Jackson was lined up in the slot over, I want to say it was Jamison Williams, and you're like, oh God, like Georgia's doomed, and they hit a slot fade or something. And he's just a baller back there. He's again, you could make the case he is their most valuable player on a defense just filled with studs.
That's a good one. What do you if they lose the game or just don't advance very far, and hopefully we'll get the opportunity to talk again before their playoff game, but if they do lose and the season's over and they don't advance very far, why do you think that'll be?
I think it'll be the offense, because I think, and this goes back to what I've said about or kind of contradicts what I said about Beck, but like there have been so many times this year where nothing comes easy. It feels like nothing comes
Yeah.
easy for this offense. Like they don't generate a ton of chunk plays at times. Turning the ball over has been one. Just it feels like they've never fully gotten going. And now again, I think they've gotten a lot closer to that over the past few weeks. But even still, you have 6 possessions in the first half of that Georgia Tech game, and you put up no points. So
Yeah.
that's not good. That's not good. So I think that, and then the defense has never. The defense, against that Texas, they dominated against Texas. They played really well the final 3 quarters against Tennessee, but then you give up 230 yards rushing to UMass. You gave up 300 total yards in the first half to Georgia Tech. So just I don't know. I think there's been so many times where it feels like the team's not necessarily in sync. Like one side will be playing well and the other side's not. But if they put it all together, man, like there's no one. I don't want to say no one can beat them, but there's no one that they can't beat. They could beat Oregon, they could beat Ohio State,
Sure.
they can beat Texas.
Yep.
It's a matter of, and I still don't think they played a full game, and that should be on the one hand, it's a scary thought for everybody. On the other hand, it's like, well, if you haven't done it so far, are you ever going to do it? And I think that's the question. If they string a few games together, there's nothing that prevents them from lifting that trophy again.
That's what's so fun about this playoff, and I'm really surprised it happened this fast. But again, it's the transfer portal, and that is the parity right now is just amazing. Like you said, I think just about any team. I think any team can get to the Final Four. And that includes Arizona State. I think any team can get to the Final Four, and I think about 8 to 9 teams can win a national championship. It's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to be really cool. And,
for sure. Yeah, it's it's going to be great. If Georgia wins a first round game or wins the SEC and doesn't play a first round game, I will be so locked in on that Saturday watching these first round matchups because they're going to be so fun. You get Arizona State going to probably Ohio State, maybe you get Indiana maybe hosting, maybe traveling somewhere. It's going to be awesome. And then
could be Alabama, Notre Dame, and South Bend.
Yeah, you get Penn State's going to host somebody, and what'll probably be a whiteout. It's going to be really cool. And then you get to these neutral bowl sites, and it's going to be awesome. And you get different schools from all over the place. It's going to be really fun. Yeah. And I think that's there's so much angst about the rankings and the transfer portal and all this other stuff, and then eventually, the games are what makes it all okay.
Yep.
And in a couple weeks or 3 weeks, we're going to get the games again.
Oh yeah.
And it's okay, we've argued and complained and moaned about this all year, and now we get to watch the games, and it's going to be cool. And we're going to talk about it in the off season. And are they going to expand? Which conferences are going to change? Whatever.
Get back into that.
But for 10 hours on that Saturday, we're going to watch those games and be like, yeah, this is cool.
Yeah, it's going to go down, and people are going to look at it as because that's what they talk about on the second playoff week of the NFL. Oh, this is the greatest weekend in the NFL each year, and this is what they're going to be comparing it to, no question. Sort of like the first week in college basketball tournament. That's what they're going to compare it to. How awesome it's going to be. Okay, so a couple more things. The offensive line. There's a lot of talent there. Not sure there is a super player there, but is there somebody that has stuck out to you this year, either positive or negative, starting on the positive side, because, pertaining potentially to the next level of the draft?
Yeah, I mean, Jared Wilson's done a great job in his first year.
Isn't that a surprise? That's like the one guy nobody was talking about in the beginning of the season.
Yeah, and he's, that was okay, you had Cedric Van Pran there for 3 years. How's a new guy going to do? And you haven't talked about him a lot, which is great. That's good news if you're an offensive lineman. He's an athletic guy. We heard that all through spring, all through fall. He's been pretty healthy off the top of my head, which can't be said for a lot of Georgia's team on the offensive line. So he's done a great job. And I think that's going to help him. I've seen some, there's 8 billion different draft. So, for whatever it's worth, some people have him as one of the top couple centers in the draft if he were to go. So it's amazing. And that's a good recruiting point for Georgia. Hey, you sit here and wait your turn for a couple of years. You start 1 year, and then you're a top pick at your
Exactly right.
It's he's done a phenomenal job. And I think Monroe Freeling as well has done a great job. Played a little bit as a true freshman last year, has played a lot more this year. he stepped up at left tackle with Ernest Green hurt the past few weeks and has done a pretty good job as well.
So if they were both healthy, you think Green would still be starting?
That's a good question.
They're pretty much
I don't know.
almost the same.
They've been playing pretty well with Monroe. I think they might go back to a rotation like they've done.
Okay.
They rotated some guys in and out. I think it'd be hard to take Monroe out of the lineup at this point with he's been playing pretty well. That's just me. I don't know that.
Sure.
But that's probably what I would do if I was Kirby Smart. Still leave him with the majority of the snaps.
And next year they'll both be starting opposite sides, right?
I think Ernest could go to the draft if he wanted to. But yeah, if they both come back, I think there's a decent chance they're both starting. I think Green honestly could be a guy that, depending on who leaves and whatever, could end up maybe even getting a look at guard. Honestly,
Okay.
But yeah, I think they're both really talented players. Green's got like a stinger in his shoulder that's really affected his range of mobility and stuff, which isn't good, especially at tackle. So, but yeah, they're both really good players, and Monroe's done a great job of stepping up with some injuries out there.
Yeah, Freeling is another guy, just like Wilson. Like nobody talked about either one of those guys when the season began, and look at the talent there. But that's what the recruiting is all about. Is eventually, like you said, when it's time to step up, it's time to step up. Who do you like better, Ratledge or Fairchild?
Well, Ratledge has better hair, so that's the tiebreaker, I guess. No, I mean they're both really good. They play just nasty ball. I think if I'm Kirby Smart, I think I'd take Ratledge right now, just only because he's been here for so long and he's such a great leader. There was a clip the other night of after Georgia's first drive of the second half against Tech, Ratledge is like in Garson Beck's face, like telling him to snap out of it. And, he told us he was telling Beck to control what you could control and all that kind of stuff. So he's just such a great leader for this entire team. He's another guy who's been here for forever, it feels like. So, yeah, but they're both really, really good. I think Fairchild is going to step into that role next year, once Ratledge is off to the NFL.
And on defense, is there a player that is maybe not a recognizable name, could be a young kid that could make some significant plays that could get his name all of a sudden in the spotlight? Because it happens every year. The later we get into the season, get to the bowl games, you get to these games here, and it's all of a sudden you see, who's that? I never even heard of that guy. Oh, yeah, he's been making his way up the depth chart. And so one of those guys on defense that has been doing that.
Yeah, I mean, I'd keep an eye on Ellis Robinson, the freshman corner I mentioned earlier. If it's an injury, whether just he rotates in, whether he just is an extra DB, could you see him? And I think defensive line, you look at Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins, like earlier in the year, he had like 3 times as many tackles for loss as anybody else. Like he had 9 and nobody else had more than 3. Okay. And he's a guy who has always had potential, but he's had just nagging injuries and foot stuff, which is never good for a big man. And he's been healthy this year and has been very good. He had a play against Tech the other night in overtime where he chased a guy down and punched the ball out at the goal line. And Tech
I remember that.
That could have been a game-winning play if Georgia falls on it. So I think that's a guy who you look at Mykal Williams, you look at Jalen Walker, you look at all these other guys. And I think Tyrion Ingram-Dawkins could be a guy who maybe doesn't get the headlines as much, but could end up making some game-changing plays in big games down the stretch.
And when you mentioned Robinson, does that mean that you also believe that within the next year or two, he's like the big dog corner here? He's the top guy?
I think so. I mean, he came in and it was just like, people have raved about him. They raved about him in practice. And it just, I think Humphrey's transfer makes it that much more likely he plays to close out the year, right? But I think going forward, he's too talented of a guy to keep him off the field. He's everything we've heard. He's that good.
Jake, give me a prediction. What do you feel? What's your gut tell you about this matchup? Can they sweep Texas and win?
I'm going to get – I haven't written it yet. I'm going to get a little punchy with our score predictions for our site this week and be like, you know what? This team always gives you what you expect least. And what I expect least is for Georgia to roll and win this by 17 points. So, yeah, sure. Why can't Georgia win like 38-20? But no, I mean – and that very well could happen because who even knows. But I think, again, I just think it's whichever team doesn't turn the ball over. It was so weird the first time that it kind of balanced out. But if one team, loses the turnover margin by a couple turnovers, it's going to be bad news. I'll pick Texas just because I think it's really hard to beat a good team twice. It should be a great game, 27, 28, 27, 31, 28, something like that. But again, I don't think there's any outcome that would surprise me at this point, just because you don't know which Georgia team's going to show up
Sure.
at any given half, even with any given half, any given quarter. I think if you're Georgia, what you need to avoid is they have these quarters where things just spiral on both sides of the ball. If you avoid those, I think you help yourself give a better chance.
Do you think if they lose the game that you think that and not just because of the injury factor, but the injury factor definitely is coming into play. If they lose this game, that you don't really feel very strongly about them winning the national championship?
I mean, it depends. If they get blown out like they kind of did against Ole Miss, it's like, well, that's not good. If they play a great game, I mean, again, I think, if they lose by 3, it's like, well, okay, you lost to Texas. It's tough to beat Texas twice, but they could move on and you move on and see how it goes. So I think as long as they don't get blown out, I think I would still, and I'm even if they win, it's like, well, they could just as easily go into the playoff in the Sugar Bowl against whoever and lay an egg for a half that they've done and lose. So I think I'm going to be in that same spot pretty much either way. Of if they play a full game, they can go beat anybody for however long this playoff goes. But if they don't show up at any given point, as they've shown a propensity to do, then they can lose to anybody in the playoff.
And lastly, is there like you've been looking at the brackets and predictions and things like that, and the fan base has been doing that as well. Is there a team at all, like if they do have to play that first round game, or if they get the bye and just the way things look, is there like a team that the fans just kind of want to play? Have you noticed that at all with some of the predictions?
I don't know what the bracket even looks like. I don't know if this fan base could handle playing Alabama again or not. I don't know that anybody wants to. I think if you asked most Georgia fans, they would like to play Alabama again, just because you feel better about your chances of beating them. You want to go through them to get to a national championship. But I don't know if this fan base can handle it again. But
I'll tell you right now, I'm not interested in. I think most fans would agree with me. Nobody's interested in a SEC first round game. Nobody's interested in Big Ten. We don't want to see that. We want to see all the weird matchups that don't normally. Hey, if Alabama plays Georgia, play them in the semis. Play them in the national championship.
I think as far as the first round games go, I think everyone feels confident in terms of who you could actually match up playing. It doesn't seem like Ohio State is a potential opponent in that first round. So
probably not.
Indiana, Notre Dame's probably going to be above Georgia too. Alabama, whoever. I think everybody feels pretty confident in their potential, who they would play in those games. I don't want to see Georgia play Texas a third time just because.
Oh, that's true.
I don't want to go through.
Especially if it's an ugly game again. Nobody wants to see a third one.
But no, I think from a fan base's perspective, I think a lot of people are kind of where I'm at. Like, I don't think there's anybody that you go into. Like, if you're, and I don't know any Arizona State fans, so this could be entirely wrong, but I feel like if you're Arizona State, you might be like, okay, well, if we match up with Oregon, if we match up with Georgia, match up with Texas, we might kind of be screwed. And I don't think Georgia feels like that about anybody. I think they feel like they could beat Oregon, they could beat Ohio State, they could beat. They've shown they could beat Texas. They feel like they can beat Boise State, Arizona State, Ohio State, Notre Dame, whoever.
Yeah,
it's just a matter of you got to show up and play like you have shown at points. The defense has shown it at certain points, and the offense has shown it at certain points. And I don't know if they've ever done it all at once. I think the Tennessee game is probably the closest, those last 3 quarters especially.
Yep.
But you got to.
And then came Georgia Tech.
Exactly. And then you get gashed by UMass and you give up. You get smoked by Tech for a half. So I don't know. I think they can. Do I think they will? Based on what we've seen, I'm not picking them to string that many games together. But they could. If they did, wouldn't shock me.
I'm going to leave links in the description of this video so everybody can check out where to find your content, Jay, including, I'm sure you got wall-to-wall recruiting content. So including your X account. So that'll be available. And again, Georgia's in the playoffs. It looks like no matter what. Hopefully we'll get the opportunity to talk again during playoff time, Jed. I know you've been busy and I appreciate your time.
Absolutely, man. Anytime.
Thanks, Jed.